The Bureau of Reclamation Security Response Forces, or BOR-SRF for short, works with the BIA-OJS for the same reason as most other law enforcement, Department of the Interior law enforcement agencies, and that is to protect their properties. Now, the Bureau of Reclamation in particular, the way their properties generally run concurrent to the BIA is essentially through water programs that are set up nearby or within, for that matter, federal Indian reservations. So, for example, the Navajo reservation, it has water settlements that are located both within and around the greater reservation. So, for that reason, the BIA-OJS and the BOR-SRF work with each other. And the BIA it also has an interest in this, because not only are some of these water settlements located within federal Indian reservations, but also they benefit Native people. They don't always benefit Native people. I know there's been a lot of distrust on that, but they do, according to the Bureau of Reclamation, focus on also benefiting Native people. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs also has an interest in that. Additionally, the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, may also have an interest in protecting Bureau of Reclamation infrastructure, particularly its pipelines, including those that are located within federal Indian reservations, as it's a part of the TSA's greater focus to preserve transportation security and overall or general homeland security. Now, in particular, when in terms of law enforcement, the TSA it has its federal air marshals, and I know this by its name, to actually protect these pipelines. So, in occasion, while it hasn't been seen yet, you may see, if their jurisdiction overlaps somehow, the Federal Air Marshals, Bureau of Reclamation, Security Response Force officers, and BIA police officers working with each other to protect that infrastructure. So, yeah. The United States Marshal Service, or USMS for short, works with the BIA-OJS to apprehend federal fugitives that are involved with crimes in Indian country. Through this, they will work not only within Indian country with the BIA-OJS, but also outside Indian country with the BIA-OJS to find and apprehend fugitives that are involved with crimes in Indian country. They will work with each other often in task forces. They don't just work with each other. They work with each other more in task forces rather than in criminal investigations, because that is primarily the U.S. Marshal Service's focus. It's not like the FBI, which primarily does criminal investigations. It's more on fugitive apprehension. That's the U.S. Marshal Service's stronger focus, in addition to its other focuses. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Refuge Law Enforcement Division has and continues to work with the BIA-OJS to protect national wildlife refuges, particularly those that are that cross paths with federal Indian reservations. They have been involved in anti-opioid reduction joint operations. They have both been involved in seizing drugs and seizing federally illegal drugs during these operations. They have the similar focus of preserving peace for a Department of the Interior lands. They will work with each other on enforcing federal fish and wildlife laws, and have done so through joint operations, criminal investigations, and task forces. While never reported, the Amtrak police may work with the BIA-OJS over protecting Amtrak, uh, federal railroads, train stations, and and vehicles that run through Indian country near federal Indian reservations. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Office of Law Enforcement, or NOAA, OLE for short, works with the BIA OJS to protect uh, overall U.S. commerce through the enforcement of federal laws regarding fish and wildlife. And this is where they particularly work with each other over protecting waters that are located within or adjacent to federal Indian reservations. Now, they enforce and regulate the overall, uh, you know, hunting for fish and wildlife. They enforce environmental laws too. Their focus is on protecting the NOAA OLE's focus is on protecting these the fish and wildlife in these waters, as they are beneficiary to actual fishers, which would sell them, which helps U.S. commerce, and that is exactly what they are meant to do as a member of the U.S. Department of Commerce, to protect and preserve commerce. So within that focus, they work with the BIA-OJS. The BIA-OJS in this focuses on protecting the waters basically itself. They also focus on like enforcing laws within those waters. But yeah, I mean, while this hasn't really quite been seen yet, I'm sure that they do work with them within this interest. As the NOAA OLE, it does patrol federal Indian reservation waters to enforce such federal laws. ICE works with the BIA OJS over basically protecting Indian country and preserving homeland security through the joint enforcement of federal immigration and customs related laws. They will basically work with each other to basically find and apprehend legal immigrants who are involved with, especially those who are involved with federal crimes such as federal drug crimes within Indian country. They have been involved in task forces for doing so. And the Homeland Security Investigations Division of ICE will especially be seen working with the BIA OJS, as they are their primary investigative component, ICE's primary investigative component. The USCG works with the BIA OJS over enforcing federal maritime and conservation laws within Indian country. All waters within or through federally recognized Indian reservations within Indian country are federal waters, and thus fall under the direct jurisdiction of federal law enforcement, including the USCG and the BIA-OJS. Now, these waters, they are both they are both federal waters and tribal waters, so they would fall under the jurisdiction of not only federal law enforcement but also tribal law enforcement. So you may see U.S. Coast Guardsmen or U.S. Coast Guards women and BIA police officers and tribal police officers working with each other on patrolling these waters, and enforcing laws on these waters as they share concurrent jurisdiction with each other over doing such. Additionally, you may see CGIS special agents, FBI special agents, tribal police detectives, and BIA special agents working with each other over investigating, certain federal maritime and conservation crimes taken on these waters. But yeah, the U.S. Coast Guard isn't one of the most frequently seen partners of the BIA-OJS. It may definitely work with each other over doing such, as Indian country has many rivers and lakes which fall under the direct jurisdiction of the U.S. Coast Guard and federal law enforcement in general. Yes, BIA police officers and other LEOs of the BIA-OJS may carry long guns while on duty, as long as they are long gun certified. So, essentially, just like all other law enforcement agencies, um, the BIA-OJS requires officers who want to carry a long gun to undergo extensive agency specific training in how to use and carry and utilize a long gun. So this includes shotguns, rifles, sniper rifles, etc. However, again, the specifics of it vary heavily by department policy, which you can find in BIA-OJS policies, which you can find at the BIA-OJS handbook. Yes, you can conduct a lateral transfer as a BIA law enforcement officer. However, the specific agency for which you can conduct a lateral transfer to varies based upon your position. So, for example, BIA police officers, they fall under the job classification series from the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, or OPM for short, as 0083, which stands for Federal Civilian Police Officer. It's labeled as just police officer because they don't need to specify federal and civilian, because the only employees that they hire, or that the only employees that they oversee are federal civilian employees. So that they don't even need to specify that. They just say police officer. But I'm specifying it so you know. But anyways, so yeah, I suggest that you transfer to another 0083 position, such as a U.S. Mint police officer, or U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing police officer, or an FBI police officer. Any of those or other 0083 positions within the federal government would be very easy to transfer to, because you're already a 0083. You're already within a 0083 position. So they generally respect individuals within the same position, and are more likely to hire you or accept your lateral transfer if you are within the same position. But I mean, again, you could also try to conduct a lateral transfer to state and local law enforcement agencies. However, the only reason why I don't suggest this is because state and local law enforcement agencies, they they do not have how do I phrase this? Uh, they the state and local law enforcement agencies, their training, they are state and local law enforcement officers. They are post credited, which stands for Peace Officer Standards and Training Accredited. That is state accredited. As a federal law enforcement officer, you are accredited by the federal government, not the state government. So the thing is, if you're going to do a lateral transfer to a state and local law enforcement agency, you won't really be able to unless you have a post accreditation for example, if you were a former police officer for a local police department, or a state police department within the state for which you are trying to do a lateral transfer to, then they probably will accept you because you have a post certification. However, if you don't have a post certification, it's going to be harder because you would have to basically be exempted from a state in order to get into there. Because again, nor federal law enforcement nor state and local law enforcement training is better. It's just different. It focuses on different things, and that's the real reason why they are not necessarily the same or equivalent, and you would have a hard time getting into there. But it would definitely help you though. But anyways, but another great position to get into as a BIA police officer is a tribal police officer. Again, very easy. However, it wouldn't really make sense because they basically have the same pay, same duties. Unless you want a big change, I would not suggest to. Unless you want a. Let me rephrase that. Unless you don't really care about how big your change is, I would not suggest trying to lateral transfer to a tribal police officer because it's going to be the same. In fact, it's probably going to have a lower paying salary. But anyways, on to special agents. BIA special agents, they are 1811 federal criminal investigators. And thus you should transfer to another 1811 position, such as an FBI special agent, for example, pretty much an NCIS special agent, a USA CID special agent, any 1811 position I'd suggest you transfer to. There are many 1811 positions. In fact, out of all BIA Leo positions, I think lateral transferring from a BIA special agent is probably going to be the easiest because there are so many 1811 positions that you can lateral transfer to. And not only 1811 positions, if you want to lateral transfer to a 0083 position or other lower standard positions, you can also do that because 1811 is a very high experienced position and is highly respected. And there are also, like I said, many positions across the federal government that are 1811. And part of the reason for that is because the majority of federal law enforcement agencies are investigative. But anyways, on to BIA correctional officers. As a BIA correctional officer, you can lateral transfer. Basically, because they are 00, they fall under the 0003 position. The 0003 OPM job classification position. I'd suggest you transfer to one of those positions. But the thing is, there are not that many options. The real only 0003 positions within the federal government are a Federal Bureau of Prisons officer, and possibly a few others, but that's really the only one, along with a BIA correctional officer. There are very few. But as a Federal Bureau of Prisons officer, you may be paid better. So it is definitely an option out there. But yeah, that's pretty much that for for lateral transferring. The main differences between a BIA prison and a tribal jail are number one, size. Uh, BIA prisons are generally much larger than tribal jails, partially and mostly due to the fact that uh, BIA prisons they often receive much more funding from the BIA-OJS than tribal jails. And then the second main difference is operation. The BIA-OJS operates BIA prisons, while tribal prisons are operated by tribes, more specifically, tribal correctional agencies. So yeah, so basically, they fall under they tribal jails. In other words, are tribal jails. I don't know what to say other than that, or tribal prisons, while BIA prisons are federal prisons. So yeah. For the question, do local police have jurisdiction on tribal lands? No. The answer is no. Local North State Police have jurisdiction on tribal lands, as they are federal properties. Again, while they fall under the constitutional sovereignty of tribes, they are operated by they fall under the legal title, I should say, of the federal government, more specifically the BIA. So no, not inherently they have jurisdiction over tribal lands, as so with the reservation roads around them and just the reservation in general. They do not. This is unless they have some sort of memorandum of understandment or mutual aid agreement with the tribe, or yeah, with the tribe over policing such, but generally no. Yeah. When a BIA police officer is involved in a shooting, that officer under BIA-OJF policies and guidelines is generally put on administrative duty, or essentially suspended until the investigation has been concluded. Now, whether that officer gets to keep his job or not varies heavily based upon how the investigation is concluded. So, if it is determined that the BIA police officer being investigated has not violated any laws or agency policies and has acted in his best interest, he or she will most likely be put in back on duty. However, if it has been determined that the officer has violated agency policies and or the law, he or she will most likely be fired. In addition to that, if a law has been violated, that officer will also most likely receive jail time or some sort of punishment, legal punishment. Now, I know what you're thinking. Who determines whether the officer has violated the law or not? Well, that generally falls under the primary responsibility of the FBI. The FBI will generally lead the investigation, and when it's done, hand over its report to the U.S. Attorney's Office, who will formally determine whether the law has been violated or not. It's important to note that an officer who has not been charged with a crime can still be fired if he or she has violated agency policies. However, an officer who has been charged with a crime must be fired, regardless of whether he or she has violated agency policies. Which is why administrative investigators wait for criminal investigators and attorneys to determine whether the officer has violated the law or not before beginning their administrative investigation to determine whether the officer has violated agency policies or not. This concept is highly universal. Generally speaking, BIA police officers receive better pay than tribal police officers, mostly due to the fact that they are federal law enforcement officers, and federal law enforcement generally has some of the highest standards for law enforcement. Additionally, it's also because the BIA-OJS, it often receives much more funding than an individual tribal police department. The BIA-OJS as a whole, if you were to compare it to a tribal police department, would generally have a higher budget. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. The BIA police and its officers face several challenges on a day-to-day basis. The most common being one of the main challenges that the BIA OJS faces is underfunding, which kind of stumbles upon some of the other challenges it faces. Several BIA OJS districts have been criticized for failing to provide enough law enforcement and security to key reservations within their districts. This is especially a problem for large reservations that already lack enough officers, or for that matter, sometimes even their own formal independent police force. For example, the Spring Lake Indian Reservation reported only having 4 BIA police officers or they reported to only have been provided 4 BIA police officers to patrol every 400 square miles of its reservation. Now that is very small. The amount of officers provided for that entire land coverage is very small. This is a problem that just, again, occurs within multiple reservations. One of the main reasons that heads of BIA OJS districts or regions, both of which are the same in the terms of the BIA, have gave for this is essentially funding cuts from Congress, which have affected their ability to hire and pay enough officers. Funding cuts, they affect a lot of things for the BIA-OJS, including, like some of the things it causes is, for example, a decrease in the number of applications for BIA-OJS positions. It has also led several BIA police officers to basically, quit their job due to a lack of proper funding, due to low pay. And then number 3, it has also led to neglect within BIA detention centers and facilities due to, again, a lack of officers. It has also affected the BIA-OJS's ability to compete in terms of salary and pay with other federal law enforcement agencies that may have a higher salary for their employees. This has made policing, investigative, correctional, and technical services such as, dispatching and radio communication services even harder for the BIA-OJS to provide. In fact, it is estimated that the BIA-OJS only receives approximately 13% of what it actually needs to provide its services to the entire Indian country nationwide. The BIA-OJS maintains district offices throughout the United States. These district offices often cover hundreds of acres of vast, remote, desolate land throughout numerous U.S. states. This makes it even harder for BIA police officers to respond to calls on time, which can prove extraordinarily devastating in cases, in catastrophic incidents, in cases such as shootouts, where urgent assistance is needed. This has, led. This has the vast geographical coverage that the BIA-OJS covers and has is often used by criminals to basically get away with their crimes by doing things like, for example, many criminals will have been known to basically use decoy calls, decoy swatting calls. They'll do something called swatting, which is essentially calling decoy calls to an area which is often far away from where the crime that the suspect who committed the decoy call is actually planning to commit that crime. So it's in this matter where there are very few officers around, like I said, in the case of like I said earlier, in the case of the Spring Lake Indian Reservation, that only had like around 4 BIA police officers to patrol every 400 square miles of land within its reservation, which is significantly, the amount of officers it has is significantly small. That is provided. So this is, it's a very big problem. It is another, it's contributing to this. The BIA-OJS often also relies on basically outdated equipment such as vehicles and, radios, because of underfunding. They can't buy new technology often because of underfunding. They are really focused on actually paying for and hiring enough officers rather than, getting more equipment and everything. So yeah, it's a problem in that manner. This has basically all led to delayed response times, which has led to crimes getting away, and even deaths, which has led to increased criticization from the public. One of the main things that Indian reservations are increasingly susceptible to are crimes. In fact, the residents of these reservations often receive crime rates up to 5 times the national average. In fact, in 2025, the FBI had approximately 4,300 unsolved or open investigations within Indian country. Approximately 1,000 of those being related to or involving crimes related to deaths. Now, a lot, some of these crimes, and the reason why some of these crimes are, unsolved is because, well, there are several reasons. One of them is because some of these crimes are taken by non-natives, which the FBI and BIA-OJS and federal law enforcement in general has very little jurisdiction over. Another one of the most common reasons is because of a lack of transparency from the public, the residents of these reservations. A lot of these residents are, they they don't trust federal law enforcement agencies. Tribal citizens and Native Americans in general have been known to have a troubling history with federal law enforcement, let's say. They've not really, especially the FBI, they've not really been known to, do good with them because essentially federal law enforcement, they're not always that transparent about things that they, are, investigating or doing. For example, the FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies have been known to fail to provide efficient information to the public on incidents within Indian country, such as officer-involved shootouts, in custody deaths, and other major and other things and other incidents. Another reason why these residents often do not provide information to federal law enforcement is because essentially one of the most common it's essentially because a lot of these residents fear that they will be targeted by cartels and their associated street gangs. Actually, cartels, they are known to commit a lot of crimes within Indian country, especially crimes related to drug and gun trafficking, along with their, of course, affiliated U.S. street gangs. And that is mainly because of, again, a lack of police officers. Indian country often lacks policing, but also because these cartels, they know that they lack enough policing, and in addition to that, a lot of cartels, they pass through the southern border, and a lot of these reservations are located around the southern border, so it is very easy for them to cross paths. These high crime rates, they have affected Indian country significantly and have made the BIA-OJS's job even harder to provide and do. The following image displays the stages in which a BIA police officer began aiming and firing at a suspect they were pursuing. It took place on December 29th, 2024 in Belcourt, North Dakota, when a civilian from the Turtle Mountain Reservation began drag racing on a highway most likely to attract the attention of law enforcement. In which he did successfully when several BIA police officers began pursuing him to a lonely road. When the pursuit stopped, the officers exited their vehicles, aimed their patrol rifles at the suspect, and told him to step out of the vehicle. The suspect partially complied with their commands by exiting the vehicle, but not fully raising his hands, only to the side. However, some would argue that his hands were away enough from his body for the officers to know he was unarmed and surrendering. What made this an incident was when one of the officers, whose name remains unknown to the public, as for most BIA police shootings, began firing at the suspect after he exited the vehicle. The approximately 16 shots the officer took at the suspect had left him dead. The officer was placed on formal administrative leave after a thorough investigation by special agents from the FBI and the BIA-OJS's Professional Standards Directorate. This incident is within the jurisdiction of federal and tribal law enforcement because it was taken on a federally recognized Indian reservation, which is outside state and local lines. It is under the primary jurisdiction of the FBI because the incident involved the unnecessary murder of an American Indian/Alaska Native, or AIAN, by a federal officer. Furthermore, the incident is indefinitely within the primary jurisdiction of the FBI because, number one, the incident took place on federal property as the scene was on a public road through a federally recognized Indian reservation. Number two, the incident involved an American Indian / Alaska Native, which the FBI has primary jurisdiction over. And when it comes to investigating crimes within Indian country. And then number three, the incident involved corruption by federal officials. You see, the FBI alone has jurisdiction over public corruption. However, what gives the FBI even more power in a case like this is the fact that it was taken by a federal official. More specifically, the incident would be classified as an act of misconduct by law enforcement. And then number four, the incident involved homicide, which is not a minor infraction, but rather a severe felony level violent crime, which the FBI again has primary jurisdiction over when it comes to crimes within Indian country. So yeah. The following image is from an incident which occurred on June 20th, 2023, in which BIA police officers, Atoy, Missouri tribal police officers, and Corson County sheriff deputies got into pursuit with a suspect driving a blue pickup truck. The pursuit had occurred after the suspect had allegedly brandished his handgun in order to intimidate others. As the suspect's car came to a stop, the suspect exited the vehicle with a handgun in his hands and began walking in circles. The officers on scene could be heard yelling, "Drop that gun," and "Get down." But after repeated verbal commands, one of the officers, specifically the BIA police officer whose cruiser is seen on the dash cam, shot at the suspect once, then twice. The FBI and the BIA-OJS Internal Affairs Division has launched an investigation into the incident. The BIA-OJS has chosen not to disclose any identification of the suspect or the BIA police officer who shot the suspect to the public for privacy reasons.
I do not. Drop that gun! Get out! Hey, 051, Boland Community Building, and Boland has got a gun. People everywhere. Drop that gun! Come on, get on the ground!
The following image is from an incident which occurred on the night of Sunday, April 15th, 2018, when a man armed with a knife, who would now be pronounced as 36-year-old Reuben Clint Stewart, was shot and killed by a BIA police officer in the town of Lodgegrass at the Crow Ridge Indian Reservation in Bighorn County, Montana. Like most other BIA police officer-involved shootings, the BIA-OJS did not release the name of the officer who shot Reuben for privacy reasons. The officer has been placed on administrative duty and the FBI and BIA-OJS have launched an investigation into the incident, again, like most other officer-involved shootings in Indian country. The following images are from an incident which occurred on August 22nd to 23rd, 2020 in Belcourt, North Dakota at the Turtle Mountain Indian Reservation, in which a man, now identified as 35-year-old Brandon Leducer, was shot and killed by a BIA police officer. There have been no details released as to why it occurred, not even about why the suspect was killed, at least of currently. The FBI's Minneapolis field office and the BIA-OJS's Internal Affairs Division are investigating the shooting. Brandon Leducer had a wife and 2 kids, a son and a daughter, who are mourning over his death. The name of the officer involved in the shooting has not been released. However, the officer has been placed on administrative duty or suspended. On October 23, 2017, at the Standing Rock Indian Reservation in Porcupine, North Dakota, Ryan Gipp, a citizen of Standing Rock, and his parents, Roberta and George, were going on a hunting trip when they pulled over at a gas station. While Roberta was filling up her car, Ryan grabbed his shotgun out of the back seat and began chambering it. Then, boom, he had accidentally fired a round. For a second, they all looked around to see if anyone had heard the shot. Luckily, at least at the time, it seemed like no one had heard, but that guess would soon be proven untrue. After they exited the gas station onto one of the reservation's highways, they soon saw a BIA police cruiser zipping down through incorrect lanes of travel, the same lanes they were on, with full ELS on. They curved along the road to avoid hitting the cruiser. Suddenly, they watched in the mirror as they saw the police cruiser make a sharp U-turn and began cruising towards their direction, still with their ELS on. Realizing they were most likely being pulled over, Ryan feared that his shotgun might cause trouble if they spotted it, so he threw it out the window, but that only made situations worse. As they pulled over, the initiating officer, Raymond Webb, stepped out of his vehicle and upon drawing his service rifle, ordered Roberta, the driver, to roll down her window and throw out her car keys. This is a unique request to hear from a Leo, but understandable considering the situation. Roberta then, complying with the officer's orders, rolled down her window and threw out her car keys. Officer Webb then handcuffed Roberta and George and placed them in his cruiser. Another officer, Officer Sandland, who is also from the BIA-OJS, arrives on scene just behind Roberta's car. As Officer Sandland arrives on scene, Ryan, who the officers had not noticed until now, jumps out the back seat of his car and for a moment begins questioning the officers while walking towards them. Officer Webb, in surprise, tases him, which scares him, causing him to stumble in a pile of dirt for a second, then flee. Ryan then runs and hides for a second behind Officer Sandland's vehicle before fleeing as Officer Webb and Sandland catch him. Officer Sandland and Webb, both with their service rifles drawn out, pursue him to behind his vehicle where dash cam footage stops. Officer Webb orders Ryan to put his hands up 2 times before firing his service rifle at him. According to the officer, Ryan had been fidgeting with his hoodie pocket before halting in a bladed stance as if he was about to shoot the officer. Officer Webb mistakenly identifies the object for which Ryan is fidgeting with as a gun and assumes he's fidgeting with it in order to load rounds into a revolver-like chamber so he can shoot Officer Sandland. In response to presumably seeing this, Officer Webb aims his service rifle at Ryan and in just 4 seconds, shoots 17 rounds at Ryan, according to the sound from the dash cam footage. Officer Webb then arrests the severely wounded Ryan before taking photos of him. Why he took photos of him, I'm not personally sure. It's either because he decided to be cruel or was going to use the photos as evidence. Officer Webb soon realized he screwed up after he searched Ryan's hoodie pockets and only found a socket wrench. Now, to be fair, this all took place at nighttime, so it was probably harder for the officer to correctly identify what it was he was fidgeting with, though it absolutely does not justify his use of force during the incident. He had fired 17 rounds, which is much more than you need to take down and, for that matter, kill someone. And it's his fault for not putting his rifle on selective fire, which he clearly did not. He was clearly using either a fully automatic rifle or fully automatic mode, which, by the way, the BIA-OJS is one of the approximately 20% of federal law enforcement agencies that allows its LEOs to use fully automatic rifles while on duty. Anyways, in his pant pockets, he did find a pocket knife, which he confiscated along with the socket wrench found in his hoodie pockets. He found multiple rounds of shotgun shells and a lighter on the ground, which he had assumed Ryan dropped when he was fleeing. This incident caused the attention of the FBI, who had came to no ultimate conclusion. A federal district court settled the case, ruling the officer's action took a judgment call and shot the suspect, who had, quote, already resisted arrest, shaken off 2 taser shots, crouched behind a truck, and pulled what looked like a gun from his hoodie pocket, quote, ended, and thus his actions were justified. On August 11th, 2022, at the Wind River Indian Reservation, a BIA police officer whose name has not been provided shot and killed a man whose name has also not been provided, and no details were further provided by authorities. One day after the shooting, the FBI and the BIA-OJS's Internal Affairs Division began investigating. This is kind of what I mean. This is literally all the information that was provided. This is why many citizens of these reservations don't, respect federal law enforcement or not respect federal law enforcement, but don't trust federal law enforcement because they are highly non-transparent over their investigations. So I mean, something like this where it's an officer-involved shooting, the families who believe their one of their family members are lost, they're probably wondering if one of their family members was involved in the shooting. And the fact that they can't even release the, just basic information like the victim of the incident or why the shooting actually occurred is very much a problem, and one of the reasons why many Native Americans don't trust all federal law enforcement agencies, even the BIA-OJS, which surprisingly should be like the last federal law enforcement agency to not be trusted by Native Americans, because it's exclusively meant to, like its name, Bureau of Indian Affairs, it's meant to have good relationships with the Native American community in Indian country. So, yeah. Have you ever wondered why BIA police cruisers have such long antennas? Well, there are a few reasons. The main being that basically, as I mentioned earlier, by the way, ignore the mountains of toys behind me. I am in my younger brother's playroom, which they barely ever clean up. It's like actually, ironically, one of the very few parts of my house that is quiet right now, which is why I came up here. But one of the main reasons why for such is because, again, like I mentioned earlier in the video, many BIA police officers are from districts which many BIA police districts cover, millions of acres of vast, remote, desolate, mountainous lands throughout multiple U.S. states. So, because of this, they rely on these long-range radio frequencies, which often require longer antennas, especially for outdated vehicles, which gets me into the second main reason, which is they rely on, like I mentioned earlier, outdated equipment and vehicles. The reason why this is a problem is because, like I mentioned, outdated vehicles, older police cruisers, just in general, will generally have longer antennas than modern, newer cruisers because they don't have the same technological advancements as newer ones do. Newer, modern police cruisers will generally have shorter, antennas, but still be able to communicate through long distances. Because of this, and this is often due to underfunding. The BIA police, like I mentioned earlier in the video, one of its main challenges is underfunding. It doesn't always have the budget to afford for new cruisers, so they have to rely on these outdated ones, with long antennas. So yeah, those are the main reasons really why they do. But one thing that might surprise you actually is that many BIA police officers often use longer range radio frequencies than state troopers. So yeah, it's pretty crazy, but I mean, at the same time, it makes sense. They, unlike state troopers, who generally cover a state, sorry. BIA police officers, they of course, they have nationwide jurisdiction, but their districts, they cover multiple U.S. states. So of course, they're going to rely on longer range radio frequencies. And again, they also work on mostly mountainous terrain, mountainous, vast, remote terrain. So they will rely on these long radio frequencies. Yeah, I mean, more specifically, they will generally use, BI police officers, they will generally use, I wrote this down, 138 through 174 range VHF high bands, which are generally non-trunked compared to non-trunked, and generally, they're generally older also compared to 700/800 MHz VHF radio bands, which are trunked and are newer. 700/800 MHz bands, those are generally the radio bands that state troopers use. BI police officers, they may also use 700/800 MHz radio bands, but that's generally only when working with state and local law enforcement. Generally, most of the time, they'll rely on 138 through 174 range VHF radio bands, which are non-trunked and older. So again, that's really why they in fact, generally tribal police and BIA police will run on parallel frequencies because, again, the frequencies for which BIA police run on will generally be, they'll expand farther than tribal police because they cover multiple reservations, whereas tribal police only cover one generally. But yeah, like they'll generally run on parallel frequencies. on a day-to-day basis. State and local law enforcement will generally only run on parallel frequencies with BIA police during joint operations, or if there are strong cooperative agreements with each other. So yeah. Have you ever wondered who maintains primary jurisdiction over most crimes within Indian country? Well, generally, federal law enforcement maintains primary jurisdiction over most crimes within Indian country. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI for short, specifically generally holds primary or leading jurisdiction over most crimes within Indian country. Now, this is simply because of two reasons. First being that most crimes within Indian country are taken on federal Indian reservations and are thus federal. The second reason is that most crimes taken within Indian country are serious felony level violations of the law, which under the Major Crimes Act, the FBI maintains primary and leading jurisdiction over, especially when they involve American Indian / Alaska Natives. The BIA-OJS, they are essentially second in line over primary jurisdiction over crimes within Indian country, second in line to the FBI. They generally there is basically almost no case for which the BIA-OJS would be excluded from an FBI investigation, because both are federal law enforcement agencies with concurrent jurisdiction. So yeah, I mean, additionally, however, they, unlike the FBI, the BIA-OJS actually has jurisdiction over both serious and non-serious violations of the law. And in fact, the BIA-OJS, in addition to having the ability to enforce federal law, they also often have the ability to enforce tribal law, which, again, the FBI generally does not have the authority to do. So there are different extents to which either one would have more jurisdiction. So, yeah, I mean, but when it comes to tribal law enforcement, when it comes to tribal police, well, let me just, yeah, I mean, the tribal police, they generally have the most restricted and the most limited jurisdiction over crimes within Indian country out of all law enforcement agencies, despite the fact they are actually the primary law enforcement provider for most of Indian country. Now, this is simply because of laws that restrict their jurisdiction, such as the Major Crimes Act and Public Law Public Law 82 through 280, I think. Those laws generally restrict BIA. Those laws will generally restrict the authority of tribal law enforcement officers. For example, tribal law enforcement officers, tribal police officers, one of the things that they cannot do, which I will get into in a different video, is arrest and prosecute non-natives. They can arrest them in a way, they can temporarily detain them or de facto arrest them, but the thing is they must hand them over to either federal, state, or local law enforcement officers immediately afterwards, because they cannot prosecute them. So, yeah, I mean, and considering that most crimes within Indian country are taken by non-natives, their jurisdiction to arresting those non-natives is very limited. So often they'll rely on either cross-deputizing from, the BIA-OJS, or they'll just rely on the BIA, and OJS, and FBI to find them. There are very little cases where tribal police can conduct their investigation solely without the without the arrival, help, or taking over from federal law enforcement agencies. They can rarely, do their investigations without getting oversight from federal law enforcement. Federal law enforcement agencies, BIA, OJS, and FBI, and others, they will generally arrive on almost all, serious crime scenes within Indian country, simply because of the expanded authority federal law enforcement has over Indian country. Though, again, ironically, generally tribal police are the first to arrive on the scene, along with BIA police too, but generally tribal police, because most of Indian country is composed of tribal police officers. They are generally the first responders to most scenes. Once it is determined that a crime falls under the jurisdiction of the FBI, special agents from the nearest FBI field office will arrive and take over the investigation. In fact, there are over 100 special agents of the FBI that explicitly focus on crimes within Indian country.